What's going on, guys? Welcome back to #AskGSM. Here today, episode 536 for Wednesday, March 6, 2024. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great week so far. If you want to send in a question to the show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post. I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not in the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. A lot of questions to get to here today. You guys delivering per usual with a fucking shit ton of questions. So let's get right into it. Emmanuel A. from YouTube, your question was, is John Cena's WrestleMania career underwhelming? Someone made a video recently about John Cena's WrestleMania resume being underwhelming for someone of his status. In parentheses, he put wrestling gifts, John Cena's underwhelming WrestleMania career, ... I believe for the full video he's alluding to. He continued on. He only had 5 main events, the last 3 of which were dedicated to his storyline with Rock, and despite WrestleMania 29 supposedly being a passing of the torch moment, the rest of Cena's WrestleMania appearances were mid-card matches, including a strangely built 3-minute loss against a post-streak Undertaker. Do you think Cena's WrestleMania history is fine as it is, or is it full of missed potential? It's funny that you said he only had only 5 WrestleMania main events. I mean, that's 5 more than CM Punk ever fucking had. So I would say 5 WrestleMania main events is quite a lot. The only person to do it more thinking now is probably Hogan and now Roman Reigns. I don't think too many people had as many WrestleMania main events as someone like a Cena or, Roman or Hogan. So that's that's nothing to scoff at is my point. No, I don't think his WrestleMania resume is underwhelming. Cena's had a lot of Mania matches, a lot of Mania appearances that date over 20 years. Now, are all of his Mania matches bangers? No, it is a bit of a scattered record, though. They aren't wrong there. I wouldn't say he's had a disappointing or underwhelming WrestleMania record as far as the matches he's had at WrestleMania. Because let's kind of go down the horn here as far as the matches he's had. Mania 20 being his first big show. Now, it wasn't a great match, but it was a good match. And him hitting the FU on Big Show to win the United States Championship, his first title of any kind in WWE, was a big moment. Same thing with the JBL match. Now, it wasn't a great match, but it was a big moment with him winning his first World Championship at WrestleMania 24. 22 was Triple H, very good match. 23 was Shawn Michaels, a great match. The triple threat at 24 with Triple H and Orton wasn't the main event, but it was a really good match for the WWE title. I really enjoyed that match. 25 was a pretty good match with Edge and Big Show. Wasn't a bad match, wasn't the best match, but it was pretty good for what it was. I really enjoyed the Batista match from WrestleMania 26. It was not the main event. That was headlined by Taker and Shawn 2. But that Cena-Batista match, I really enjoyed the feud, and I really enjoyed that original encounter as well from SummerSlam 08, and I thought they topped it very nicely at WrestleMania 26 with Batista as the heel, Cena chasing him. Really, really fun match. 27 obviously being the Miz match, not a good match as we know. 28 was the Rock match. Now, not only was that better than for me, it delivered. I never expected an instant in-ring classic, but they went in there and delivered on the hype, I thought, and had a really good match. He lost that match, which was a shocking outcome. And not only that, but it was the highest grossing Mania, I believe, in WrestleMania history of all time. And it's kind of hard to, discuss that now with the network being a thing, the Peacock being a thing, and stuff like that. Now, you can argue all-time attendance and, live gate, numbers, and they say they break the record year after year, whatever. But I'm talking pay-per-view buys. That Mania did more pay-per-view buys than I believe any other Mania in WWE history. And that was largely because of the build for Rock and Cena 1 year in advance. The 29 one was also successful in that respect, but the match sucked. So then from there, it kind of gets a bit weird. So you go from 29 to 30, and that was when he had the Bray Wyatt match, which was a good match. I hated the fucking outcome. I didn't love the match, but it was a good match. The Rusev match was pretty good. He won the United States Championship on that show as well. Then you have the 32 he wasn't at. He was there, but he didn't wrestle. 33 was the mixed tag against Miz and Maurice with Nikki Bella. Again, a basic TV match that was made more special by the post-match proposal from Cena to Nikki, which did not age well, obviously, as quickly as a year later they were already broken up, which is kind of crazy. But so you had that. Mania 34, the Taker squash. Not really, obviously, it was a fucking squash. He got destroyed by Taker, which was disappointing. 35, he did not wrestle at. 36, he had the Firefly Funhouse match, which was one of the better matches of that Mania weekend inside the... No, that wasn't the Thunderdome. That was still during COVID, though. That was a unique concept, and it was cool. I enjoyed that. And then 37, did not wrestle at. 38, did not wrestle at, and had the Austin Theory match last year. That wasn't all that great. So I can't really say it's full of missed potential. I mean, Cena's had a lot of WrestleMania matches, has won a lot of those Mania matches. And not only that, but a lot of those matches were against top-tier names. Now, again, could they have been better matches? Sure. He can always say that he faced Undertaker at WrestleMania. The problem was that Taker match didn't happen at least 10 years sooner and was a 2-minute squash. That was the issue with that match. But Taker's WrestleMania resume includes The Rock. It includes Edge in that triple threat, Shawn Michaels, Batista, Triple H, Randy Orton, again, in a triple threat, not one-on-one. That's a lot of names, though, and some future top talent. I mean, not Rusev necessarily, but Bray Wyatt he faced twice, putting over Austin Theory. The match wasn't great, but at least Theory won. Big Show he faced one-on-one, JBL. I mean, he's had some pretty big names at Mania, so no. A long answer to a quick question here. No, I do not think Cena's WrestleMania career was underwhelming. He had enough big names on that record and enough good WrestleMania-worthy matches to make that WrestleMania record of his feel like it was, like it belongs to a star of his caliber, of Cena's caliber. So, no, I would argue that it was not underwhelming by and large. Chris W. from YouTube, their first question was, he said, "Hey, Graham, hope you're doing well and having a fantastic week. Do you see the Creed brothers being involved with WrestleMania? I feel their momentum has really taken a hit since they debuted on the main roster, and they need something to get more buzz back on them. What about you?" I don't see them being at WrestleMania. I mean, they've barely been on TV since losing that tag team title opportunity to Judgment Day back late last year. Now, how much of that has to do with just there being no plans for them? And how much of that has to do with the fact that there could be heat on them, which we never really had any follow-up on, so maybe not. But that weird-ass finish to the Judgment Day Tag Team title match, where I think Brutus Creed landed right on Damian Priest. I don't know if he almost injured him or what, but Damian acted pretty fucking weird after that match. And, just threw, I think it was either Julius or Brutus right out of the ring afterward, and he looked fucking pissed. And again, I don't really put a lot of stock in the whole heat conversation because we haven't heard anything about it since. But even around then, it wasn't really confirmed that something went wrong. We never really found out what happened there. And I talked to Brutus Creed for an interview about a month later over Royal Rumble weekend. I didn't bring it up, but I don't think he would have really would have confirmed it anyway, even if it was true. But, it is kind of weird that we really haven't seen them on TV at all. I think they had that one spot, that one match to crown, and not to crown the number one contenders, but it was a part of that number one contenders tournament, en route to Elimination Chamber. They lost that. I don't think they've wrestled a single time on Raw beyond that, though. They've had a lot of matches on Main Event. I watch Main Event. I'm one of fucking 5 people who do. They've had a lot of matches there, but not really, no matches really on Raw, and no real appearances either. Which is weird for a team that they called up in October, was on Raw pretty regularly, racking up wins, gradually getting over, and then they just disappeared. So, yeah, I think their usage on the main roster so far has been weird because they got off to a strong start, and we've barely seen them since. In singles matches, tag team action, no storyline, not even an appearance backstage for the most part. So, I think that's pretty weird. I also agree that their momentum's taken a hit. But I don't really see them being involved with WrestleMania because they're not even involved with Raw right now and haven't been for the entire, year of 2024 up to this point. How would they even factor into WrestleMania? Unless they do a Mania showcase match again for the men with the tag teams, And even then, I feel like we've already seen that on Raw and SmackDown in recent weeks with like the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team matches, so why would they do it again? Maybe in a match like that, but even then, I feel like a team like DIY would get the spot over them or Imperium, because they're not even on the show right now, for whatever reason. His second question, do you think pro wrestling needs to go back to female managers/valets? I've always liked the idea of a female manager because their client's opponent can't strike her, creating good heat. Many great female managers like Sherry Martel, Nancy Benoit, Sunny, Trish, Deborah, and many others have mastered the heel female manager incredibly well. What do you think? I mean, we already have a lot of female heel valets and managers, and maybe not as many as the time period of what you're talking about, but, you know, Karrion Kross is Scarlett on SmackDown. Actually, there is quite a bit on SmackDown specifically. There's Scarlett with Karrion. B-Fab was with Hit Row, but now with Bobby Lashley and the Profits. Zelina Vega, obviously, and she still wrestles pretty regularly, but, you know, she's with the LWO. Legado has now Elektra Lopez back in the mix, and even I was just thinking, like those four, you even have Mia Yim Michin with the OC. And again, we don't really see her with them often at this point. Now, those aren't like the level of Sherry Martel, but you're asking, oh, when are we bringing back the female managers and valets? We have 5 right now as it is on SmackDown. I don't really remember Raw, but I mean, even Rhea Ripley isn't really a manager or valet, but she's with the Judgment Day and kind of is in their corner for some matches. So, I mean, there are a lot of female valets in WWE specifically. Probably a few more in NXT that I'm not really thinking of. AEW, I know they used to have... Do they have any female managers? I know they have Maria, and she's in Ring of Honor, which is a fucking waste. I mean, she should be in AEW on AEW TV at that point, but I can't think of too many in AEW on TV. But I do know that, obviously SmackDown has their fair share of managers and valets. Now, you can argue the validity of, are they credible? Are they actually the level of the people that you mentioned? Probably not, but I mean, those are good examples. So, I mean, I would argue that stuff never really went away. For the longest time, and it's not really your question, but for the longest time, we had a lot of female valets, but no male managers with female superstars. And I feel like that kind of changed with Jade Cargill and AEW, with them, her having like fucking 50 different managers, of what it felt like. It was only like 2, but it was only Scott, or what was his name, Mark Sterling and Stokely Hathaway, but that was really about it. But I feel like we should have more heel male managers with female superstars, because it makes them feel like a bigger deal too. Robert Stone was with a lot of women for a while, as far as being a manager, that is. Mercedes Martinez, Chelsea Green, Aaliyah, which was a waste, obviously. But, they did that with him in NXT, but I feel like we should get another one. When Jade Cargill eventually debuts on WWE TV, we've said this before, but MVP. And I think JJF specifically, shout out to him, he specifically mentioned throwing him MVP and Omos with Jade Cargill. I mean, Omos is already with MVP. You really have no role for Omos at this point. Why not just make them a little mini faction? And then Omos can be the heavy for Jade, like he was for AJ Styles a couple of years ago. And having a giant like that for Jade is a pretty good visual. So, and Jade's already, a pretty tall Amazon as it is. She's a pretty tall woman as it is. But I think having Omos as our manager would be pretty cool. It's like a bouncer type thing. Anyway, so your next question: which pro wrestling story from behind the scenes really shocked you? I have no idea, but I mean, the one that comes to mind the most is probably the Vince stuff. I mean, not even just the recent stuff. I mean, reading the lawsuit didn't entirely shock me. I mean, it does pretty much. It is pretty appalling to know how much of a monster he really is. But a lot of that stuff, honestly, isn't truly shocking. Maybe the disgusting nature of it. But we've always kind of known Vince to be a fucking weird-ass person, so that's not entirely shocking. Like, if I saw Daniel Bryan's name in that thing, that would be shocking. But I mentioned Vince, not really the more recent stuff, although that was shocking as well. But the initial... Again, it wasn't really the fact that he was involved in this sort of stuff with the hush money. We're going back to 2022 here. It was more so the fact that it actually got him out of power in WWE. That fucking shocked me. I thought we would never see a day where WWE was run by anyone other than Vince McMahon, until he died anyway, which did not seem like would be for a very long time, and it might still be a very long time. His mom lived until like 100 and something, I believe, so Vince may not be on his deathbed anytime soon. But it wasn't really a case of him stepping down voluntarily. He was kind of forced out and then forced out again recently. But that first time was definitely one of the most shocked times I've ever been, in the sense that I really never thought he would leave. Even with all the allegations, he has escaped this sort of shit before, and it still was enough to do him in. Now, again, he did work his way back into the fold in early 2023 before being ousted out again in January 2024. Thank God. I wish he didn't take that to get him out. And for someone like, this woman involved in the lawsuit to have to accuse him of this sort of stuff and for her to have to go through this bullshit and stuff like that. But at least it got him out of power. So that would probably be the most shocked I've ever been by a behind-the-scenes story. I mean, I wasn't watching when the Benoit stuff happened, when the Montreal screw job happened and stuff like that. So the Vince thing might be the biggest behind-the-scenes news story that I've heard that really, really shocked me. In the time that I've been a fan, anyway. Your next question. Last week you mentioned that you did a review of Evolve Wrestling. I have never seen much on Evolve, but I have heard about it and how many wrestlers like Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, Keith Lee, Matt Riddle, TJP, and Zack Sabre Jr. Kind of came out of it, I guess he's saying. What are your thoughts on Evolve, and did it help the business, and especially independent wrestling? Yeah, so I mean, I haven't really seen many Evolve shows. I mentioned Evolve last week. I don't remember the context. I think I mentioned it because... I mentioned it because I went to an Evolve show on Leap Day 4 years ago. Not the only Evolve show I've been to. I've been to 2 Evolve shows. I went, and I didn't actually see the end of either one, which is pretty funny. I left both times early because they were in New York, and I honestly only really went to meet people that were there. Like at the first one, I met Johnny Gargano, Candice LeRae, Tommaso Ciampa, Walter, Cassius Ohno, and they were all awesome. And they were all in NXT at that point. So I didn't really have any interest. I honestly have no recollection of the show itself. Because it was in New York. It was in fucking Brooklyn. It took a long time to get home. So, I ended up leaving early. And then the other one on Leap Day, from a couple months later, I met, like I said, Tommaso Ciampa again, Keith Lee and Rhea Ripley. And then COVID happened. It closed down. And then they haven't run any shows since. So those shows were perfect for like meet and greets because... obviously, the guy that was running it was working in WWE, Gabe Sapolsky or whatever his name is. So they would have NXT people on the show. But there were a lot of people that were in Evolve that ended up working for NXT years later. It was kind of like NXT before NXT. I mean, we've had NXT for like 10 years now, obviously, but it was almost like NXT's feeder system because they would put a lot of people that were in NXT in Evolve, from NXT in Evolve, people like the Prophets, stuff like that to kind of have a run there before coming back to TV and being more, crafted talents. Like the Street Profits actually had a run as the Evolve Tag Team Champions. So Evolve was pretty good with that sort of stuff. It was like an alternate territory for NXT. And then again, a lot of everyone that you mentioned went on, aside from Zack Sabre Jr., to sign with WWE. Now, Zack Sabre Jr. probably got the opportunity in the Cruiserweight Classic because of Evolve. TJP won the Cruiserweight Classic and the title and joined WWE because he was in Evolve previously. Matt Riddle in 2018 joined WWE from Evolve. Keith Lee from 2018 joined WWE because of Evolve. Ciampa, Gargano, same thing among other people. They signed like the remnants of the Evolve roster in 2020, 2021, and they kept almost none of them. I think there might have been one person from that group they ended up keeping. Without firing them. I think they fired the rest, which is pretty, which sucks. But, Evolve was a really good indie promotion. From what I've seen, again, I haven't seen a lot of their shows. I did watch the 15-year anniversary show. I think it was the 10-year anniversary show is what it was. And they put it on the network in 2019, one of the first, indie shows to be live broadcast on the network. And it was a pretty big deal at the time, and it was a good show. But it was like a feeder system for NXT. And it helped the business as far as giving people like Riddle, Lee, Gargano, Ciampa an additional platform to really ply their craft and go on to bigger companies, whether it be AEW in the years that followed, but primarily WWE in the late 2010s. So, Evolve was a pretty big indie promotion in that respect. And then because WWE kind of owned it, and they were kind of WWE owned by 2020, when they sold the WWE, they just folded and gave them their entire library, their roster, and everything. So that's kind of what happens when you work with WWE. At a certain point, if you don't cut it off after a while, they just end up owning your territory and have no interest in running the company. And that's exactly what happened with Evolve. It might have been dying down anyway, I don't know, but that's just kind of the way that I interpreted it. His next question, which version of Edge do you prefer? Pre-retirement Edge from 05 to 2011 or post-retirement Edge, 2022 present? I mean, post-retirement Edge has been awesome. I mean, the fact that he's even been able to get another run in WWE and now in AEW has been amazing. And I've probably been more favorable towards a lot of the stuff he's done than most people. I fucking loved a lot of the stuff he's done since coming back. Now, not everything he's done since coming back has been a winner, but everything from the Randy Orton feud, which was really, really well done. The Mania match that year at 36 was not great. The second match was a lot better. And those, obviously dealt with empty arenas and shit, but, the feud itself was amazing. The stuff with Roman Reigns in 2011 was amazing, or 2021 was amazing. And Seth Rollins that same year. I enjoyed the heel turn in 2022. It, created Judgment Day. I enjoyed that heel character. I thought it was very short-lived, but I understand that people weren't really buying it, so I understand why they cut it short. And then in feuding with Judgment Day and wrapping up recently, going to AEW, I've really enjoyed post-retirement Edge. But you gotta go pre-retirement Edge. I feel like that was Edge in his prime. From like 05 to 2011, we're talking rated R superstar era, the era in which I started watching WWE. Edge was a big part of it. I started watching WWE because of William Regal on the Raw brand, but I got into SmackDown soon after because of Edge and Taker and the feud that they were having on Friday nights. And that Edge was constantly avoiding Taker and avoiding getting his comeuppance and stuff like that. He was evading Taker at all costs, and it was a great storyline. And then Taker ended up giving him his comeuppance. I thought it would come at One Night Stand in the form of the TLC match. It didn't end up happening until SummerSlam inside Hell in the Cell. So I got to go pre-retirement Edge. I mean, 05 to 2011, he was amazing. Had that brief face run for a while before retiring. Some of the stuff with Del Rio, Christian. 2010 wasn't his best year. I mean, the stuff with Jericho was good, but like feuding with fucking Kane and shit like that wasn't great. But like 09, 08, 07, 06, 05 Edge was just amazing. So I got to go pre-retirement Edge, but I've still really enjoyed post-retirement Edge as well. Micah Does It from YouTube, their first question was, if you could go and attend any 5 WWE shows and sit front row where a green shirt guy sits, which shows in WWE history would you go to? I'm going to point this to the question I answered last week from Chris W. on YouTube, where he asked, what 5 shows did you not go to, would you have loved to have been to? And he mentioned Mania 17 for himself. I said the same thing. I mentioned Mania 17, Money in the Bank, 2011, a lot of different shows. I mean, really any of those would be my answer. So take the answer of the question I answered last week, apply it to this one, it would be a lot of the same stuff. I mean, all the shows that I did go to, being ringside for them would have been cool, but it didn't really make much of a fucking difference. So, listen, I was sitting last row for the Hardy Boys' return at WrestleMania 33. It did not make a lick of a fucking difference. I still lost my mind and my voice specifically for a fucking week after that. That's how great it was. So, that doesn't really matter to me. Like, I wish I could have been ringside. I wish I could have been there for the shows I mentioned last week, and being ringside would have just been a plus. So you can just reference that question as far as my answers for that one. Your next question, is Paul Heyman the greatest manager for pro wrestling, and who should be inducting him into the Hall of Fame? I mean, a case can be made that he is. I would say that he is. The only other name that comes close, if not outright beating him, was Bobby the Brain Heenan, just because he managed a lot of top talent and was just such a great, memorable character in the time that he was active as a manager in the 80s and early 90s and stuff like that. And he was managing multiple people at the same time. So, I mean, I still might put him over Paul Heyman, but Heyman's just been around for such a long time. And we're talking as a manager, so probably from Brock Lesnar. And I'm sure he managed people in ECW, but I'm going from like Brock in 02, and maybe there's some of the stuff he was doing with the ECW guys in 01, but primarily Brock in 02 to present day. So, I mean, if you just count this stuff with Brock, Punk, and Roman alone, among the other people he's managed in that time, like Big Show, but again, who really cares? Ryback, Curtis Axel, Cesaro, all those were fucking flops. I mean, that stuff doesn't really make much of a difference. But the three names I mentioned, Punk, Roman, and Brock, not only have had three of the longest title reigns in recent WWE history in the last 20 years, but three of the biggest names to have dominated WWE in the past 2 decades. With Punk, yeah, he had that 434-day run as WWE champion that Heyman was not there for a lot of. He only joined towards the end, but they were a great pairing during that period, and Punk was doing some of his best work around then. With Brock, again, he kind of burst him onto the scene. He managed him when he came back, up until he turned babyface anyway in 2020 or 2021. And with Roman, I mean, he also was there when he broke the streak, so he was managing Brock at that point in WrestleMania 30. And with Roman, he's been with him the entire time that Roman's been the world champion since 2020. So you can't really forget about that either. I mean, literally since day one, he started managing Roman on SmackDown that Friday. That Sunday, he won the title and has been champion ever since. So it really is the Paul Heyman effect. And they've been a great, phenomenal pairing ever since. So I would say he's the greatest manager of all time. I might say Bobby Heenan. Today I'll say Heyman. I guess it really doesn't matter. It's all a matter of who you talk to and who you kind of grew up on. As far as who should induct him into the Hall of Fame, I mean, there's really any number of people. People are saying, it's a shame that Brock can't make it because of this current situation. I don't think Brock was ever going to induct him anyway. I don't know if Brock would have given the most heartfelt induction speech, although that would have been interesting, but I'm not really sure that would happen anyway. I still think it's going to be Roman, and that's not a great answer just because there's a lot more people that know him a lot better and have had more history with him than Roman Reigns. But it's WrestleMania week, and he's managing Roman to the main event of Mania on night 2. So, to me, I would just think it would make sense that he would be inducting him. I don't really want to see that. I mean, Heyman would get a great induction speech from Roman Reigns, but I feel like it should be someone from ECW, like a Dreamer or a Bully Ray, someone else that he was close with in ECW. If not, someone like a CM Punk. Punk's just a better talker. He's known Heyman for a long time, probably not as long as Brock Lesnar, for example, but he's known him longer than Roman Reigns. So personally, I would go Punk, because someone asked me, I think it's actually Micah does it actually. His other question was, what would you have CM Punk do at WrestleMania since he's injured, but more than likely will be a part of the show? I wouldn't even really have Punk on the show. It's hard to have Punk on the show, unless he's in a backstage segment real quickly to cross paths with Drew McIntyre. It's hard to have him on the show, but not interacting with Drew, who put him on the shelf. I'd rather they just keep Punk off the show entirely until he's ready to come back, and then he gets that big pop for the first time his music hits. I mean, I know he was a part of the press conference in Vegas a month ago, but he wasn't on stage, he was a fucking pre-show panelist, so I could see him doing that again. But if they want to have him make an entrance, it wouldn't be at Mania. It could be for the Hall of Fame inducting Paul Heyman, so I would be totally cool with that as well. Your last question, I'm pretty sure we're getting a tag team match at Mania with Rock and Roman versus Cody and Seth. That being said, who goes over? I wrote a whole article earlier today on Bleacher Report as far as why Rock should not wrestle. I am looking forward to the match. I don't want to sound like I'm a whiny baby. I'm not happy with anything they give me. I am looking forward to the match. I just don't really think it's necessary for The Rock to wrestle. But we are getting the match, like you said. And part of the reason why I don't really want to see the match is that no one involved should be taking the loss. Someone's going to have to, and I would not do a fucking non-finish or a draw or a DQ or a countout in the main event of Mania either. That'd be just stupid. But I do think the heels have to win to give Rhodes... I mean, it is possible Cody and Seth win, but I think it's more likely that Cody takes the pinfall loss on night 1, wins on night 2, overcoming the bloodline interference and stuff like that. To me, that's the story to tell. And it would be Cody taking the loss. I would not have Rock lose his first match back. Roman certainly should not be losing if he was to get pinned on night 2. That'd be pretty dumb if he got pinned on night 1 too. And then Rollins is the World Heavyweight Champion, who should hopefully be losing on night 2 anyway. He should not be losing back-to-back nights. So I'm going to say Cody takes the losing fall, but the heels going over. That's my guess. Let's see here. Next question from Jordan B. Their question was there any wrestling theme song that you did not like at first but caught on to you over time? For me, I would say DIY's current theme song. I also think the Creed Brothers' new theme song will win me over in a month or two. I like the Creed's other theme. I know they just got a new theme. I'm not fond of it. Maybe it will win me over. I don't know. I'm sure there's been a lot of examples. I went through my entire music library of all the theme songs I have on my phone, thinking which one of these I did not like at first, but I ended up liking soon after. There were songs I didn't really care about, and then ended up really liking. There's not many theme songs I did not like initially, but ended up loving. There are examples. I couldn't really think of any. One that came to mind, though, was when Samoa Joe went to AEW, and it was a pretty quick turnaround time, but he went to AEW when he got the new theme song, because I loved his WWE song. It was fucking great. He went to AEW. It was clearly a knockoff of the WWE song, so I wasn't really a fan of it. I am at the point now where I like his current theme more than the one he had in WWE. I fucking love his AEW song. So it wasn't very long before he debuted. I did not like it. I'm thinking, again, it's a rip-off of the other theme. Within a couple of weeks, I'm like, man, this is actually a really, really good song. And he's got a great song, and I think it's better than the WWE one. It feels like a proper, worthy sequel to that original theme in WWE. And a lot of his themes across his entire career have sounded similar. The AEW one might be the best, in my opinion anyway. So I would say Samoa Joe from AEW is the one that comes to mind. Hand Sanitizer, 1963 from YouTube, their question was, should wrestlers add more submissions as finishers to add variety in mystery in how a match can end, instead of waiting around for a finisher to be the end and the only way most matches end? No, I mean, I've said that for a while. I totally agree. I feel like wrestlers having a submission alternate finisher is great. I mean, Gunther has the Boston Crab. I think he won with that on Monday, did he not? Jericho always had the Walls of Jericho, among other people. There's been a lot of people. I mean, even Sheamus for a while, I think, had the Celtic Knot, which was basically a sharpshooter, I think. You know, Bret Hart won with a lot of submissions. He didn't win by pinfall a lot of the time. But John Cena, to his credit, always had the AA, the FU, and the STF and the STFU. He had two different finishers, one by submission, one by pinfall, and he had that variety. Not a lot of people have that. Taker had the Go-Go Plata and the Tombstone, obviously, among other stuff. I love when wrestlers have multiple finishers, so they don't have to hit just one. Like a believable finisher that they've won with enough times where I think it could actually end a match. So I like that, and I wish more wrestlers would have that. I agree. Brandon A. from YouTube, their first question was, he says, what's up, GSM? Hope all is well. Ironically, I was in the middle of watching WrestleMania 7 when I heard about Virgil's passing. From that leads to these next few questions. First, what are your thoughts on the DiBiase and Virgil feud? It was a little bit before my time. I was only 4 in 1991. And I know it was before your time, he said. I thought the feud was really well done. Secondly, in general, I thought WrestleMania 7 was actually pretty good. The crowd was hot all night, and there were a number of good matches, as well as good moments, in my opinion. I thought that the main event with Hogan and Slaughter delivered. I thought the opening was great between the Rockers and the Heenan family. Of course, you have an excellent middle-of-the-card match in Angle with Savage, Warrior, Elizabeth, and Sherry. And as a bonus, you get Taker's WrestleMania debut and a pretty good tag team championship match between the Hart Foundation and the Nasty Boys. Right now, it is my pick for most underrated WrestleMania, and I'll put Hogan vs. Slaughter as way up there for one of the most underrated. Your overall thoughts on Mania 7? I haven't seen the Mania enough times. I mean, you make a good case as far as why it's a good Mania. I mean, first of all, backtracking before I forget, as far as the DiBiase and Virgil thing, again, it was before my time, so I don't really have these connections or attachments to the feud. I've only seen the big matches and moments from them, but I think it's one of the best storylines in WWE history, as far as they had him as his manager, as basically as just this guy that he would beat up all the time. A manservant gets thrown around, but there's a lot of, racial tie-ins there, so I don't really feel comfortable saying that. But that's basically what he was to DiBiase for the time that he was there. And the fact that he was black obviously probably had a lot to do with the fact that he was his manager, as far as why Vince did that, to kind of make it seem like, oh yeah, he's less than DiBiase, to really drive home the fact that, whatever. I mean, if it was literally anyone, I mean, not just anyone else, but I think that might have been part of the reason why they did that, to kind of really drive home that in the eyes of the company, or in DiBiase's eyes, that Virgil was beneath DiBiase. Could it have worked with other people? Absolutely. I mean, you could tell that story with pretty much anyone. But they might have had those racial connections for a reason. I wouldn't doubt for a second that was why they did that. and why they chose Virgil specifically for that storyline. But he ended up playing that breakout babyface really, really well as far as attacking DiBiase, turning on him, getting a massive reaction. Now, the follow-up wasn't great. He ended up losing the belt right back to DiBiase, I think, a little while later. And Virgil was never going to be a world champion, but he played that role well of someone who gained sympathy from being beat up on all the time before finally snapping and turning on DiBiase and then winning that $1 million championship that he'd hold for DiBiase a lot of the time, beating him for it soon after. So I think that's a great storyline. For Mania 7 itself, it's not a Mania, like I said, I've gone back and watched a lot. I've probably only gone back and watched it once. Now, there's matches on the show I've seen multiple times, like Warrior and Savage and other stuff like that. The overall Mania, I really don't care about. I don't really think there's any Mania from 1 through 9 that I would go back and watch in its entirety. 3 has historical significance, as did 1. 6 is probably my favorite of all those first 9. 4 is just the entire tournament took place on that show, so it was kind of a mess. 8 I wasn't a big fan of. 9 is awful. But 7, yeah, I guess it was a good show. I'm not saying it's a bad Mania. Hogan and Slaughter does not go down as one of the best Mania main events by any wide margin whatsoever. I could name, you said most underrated, but I guess it is underrated. I haven't gone back and watched it, so you might be right. It is a pretty solid show. What was that, 93? Was that 90? No, that wasn't 93. That was 92? No, it was 91 actually. It was 91. It was when that Mania took place. It's a good show. I really don't care too much about Mania 7, but a lot of that also comes from the fact I didn't grow up on that Mania. I didn't grow up on some of the other Manias too, and I can recognize them as being classics. I don't think 7 will go down as being, there's other Manias I think are also very good that don't get enough credit. So it might be one of the more underrated Manias, and you might not be wrong when you say that. I wouldn't go so far as to say the most underrated, because again, if it was so great, I feel like more people would put it in the conversation of best Mania of all time. And no one ever does, probably for a reason. But I'm not to say it's a bad show, though. Your second question, speaking of underrated WrestleMania matches or underrated WrestleManias in general, give me what are some of your underrated WrestleMania matches and shows. I'd put Jericho versus Benoit versus Angle on the list from WrestleMania 2000. I'd put WrestleMania 12 and WrestleMania 22 on the list, with WrestleMania 7 as underrated shows overall. Again, I really don't care about those Manias. You said they're underrated, and that's probably why they're underrated, because I'm underrating them. But I just would not go back and watch those Manias. They're good shows, but I wouldn't say that's because that they're underrated shows. That's the thing, at least in my opinion. 22 is a perfectly good show, but it's not a show I would ever go back and watch in its entirety again. There's some good stuff on there, but there's really nothing overly that special about that show. Mania 12, what was that? Again, that was headlined by fucking Psycho Sid and Hogan. Not to say that the main event makes or breaks the show, but that's the first thing I think of. I know it also had Flair and Savage. I can't even remember the undercard, but again, I feel like if it was that great, then more people would be talking about it. There would be more matches I could remember from that Mania. I don't think there's... In my opinion, I don't think a good show means an underrated show. I'm thinking of Mania shows that were great, not good, but great, that people don't really talk about as being among the greatest. I would say 23 is more underrated than 22. 22 is fine. 23 I'm not even a big fan of either, but 23 at least you had Batista, Taker, Cena, Shawn, some other good stuff on the show, and that was a pretty big Mania. 24, I would even say, is underrated. I don't know. I fucking love 24. It had the Big Show Mayweather match, an amazing Money in the Bank ladder match. The triple threat for the WWE title that I mentioned earlier with Cena, Orton, and Triple H was pretty good. Edge and Taker was a great main event. Ric Flair's retirement against Shawn Michaels, among other matches. So, I don't know. To me, everything is subjective, obviously. I would say that is more underrated than 12 or 22. I don't give a fuck about those Manias at all. And 24, I'm biased towards because I started watching that year, so I get it. But, that's kind of what it comes down to for a lot of people. As far as underrated Mania matches, I'm sure I've answered this before. I think I did a whole video on it here on the channel many years ago. I'm thinking more recently, though. I'm thinking CM Punk and Orton for Mania 27 because everyone says, oh, it's the worst Mania of all time. But, there were some pretty good matches on that show. And it probably is one of the worst, but... Orton and Punk was a great match. Cody and Ray from that same show was great. Oh, man. I don't even know. I'm trying to think of other matches. I mean, Jericho and Styles I always thought was underrated for Mania 32. I always thought that was a really good match. I don't know. I mean, there's just so many that I can't even think of off the top of my head. Christian and Jericho for Mania 20s and or is that 19? I think that's 19. They had an excellent. Oh no, that was 20 because 19 was Jericho and Triple H, or Jericho and Shawn Michaels. So 20 was Christian and Jericho. I would say that one was underrated. The early Manias, it's hard to say. I'm sure there are some that I'm not really thinking of from those early Manias, but I haven't watched those religiously to the point where I can name underrated matches from those Manias. Like, the fucking Attitude Era ones are awful. Those Attitude Era WrestleManias were just fucking terrible, I'm sorry. I'd rather watch the ones that you mentioned over the ones from the Attitude Era. The ones from the Attitude Era, like 14, 15, 16, were just fucking ass, I'm sorry. Overall, they were not good shows. 17 was obviously the greatest of all time, but the Attitude Era for a period that was so hot for WWE, those Manias overall are just a slog to sit through. I guess you could say the same thing about some of the recent Manias, but pretty much every Mania since 37 has been good to great. 37 was pretty good, 38 was great, 39 was even better. So we're on a pretty good stretch right now, but people prefer the nostalgic stuff, so I get it. But yeah, I'm sure I did a whole video, articles about underrated matches. I couldn't come up with the whole. I put together these questions at like fucking 3 o'clock in the morning last night, so I couldn't put together the list. But I've done other videos and articles about it here on the channel, so they're readily available there if you want to check them out. But your third question was, next, just following up with one of my questions from last week. He said, you mentioned that you had no idea what the path of totality was regarding the solar eclipse. It's basically the geographical line, I can't pronounce that, where you are able actually to see the total eclipse. If you are close to the line but not within it, you may be able to view a partial eclipse. The dead center of the path of totality for this 2024 eclipse will basically hit Dallas, Cleveland, he said my city in parentheses, and Buffalo if we're talking about major U.S. cities. Other cities will be on the path, but more on the fringe, and other cities will be just on the outside of it. I think Philadelphia will be too far, but Pittsburgh will probably be able to see parts of it. Where I stay in Northeast Ohio is supposed to get absolutely slammed, and all grade school kids will be getting the day off. Well, that's pretty cool. Most college students will be getting the day off either entirely or partially. It's a pretty huge deal here since the next time this will happen in this part of the century is 2099. I will definitely be dead by then, so I'm not viewing that one. But yeah, so that is pretty cool. Thank you for the link. I have not had a chance to check it out yet, but I will at some point. Hopefully this week I'll click on your link and check out what you're talking about. So thank you for sharing that. That's pretty cool. I like that sort of stuff. I mentioned last week I love like the leap day shit, and what you're talking about is also pretty cool. So I don't follow the moon, sun stuff pretty often, but when I hear about that sort of stuff and it's happening around now, it's pretty cool. So I'll have to check that out. No L from Facebook, their first question was, what would be your top 5 WrestleMania stages of all time? I don't even have a top 5. I have 2. Mania 33 and 39. Those are the best in my opinion. And I was there for both, but those 2 stages were phenomenal. The other ones that I guess you can I'm trying to think of other Mania stages. 30 looked cool. I don't know. I always enjoyed the 31 one. I don't know. There's really nothing overly special about the other Mania stages. But I mean, 33 and 39 are objectively the best Mania stages they've ever done. There's not even a top 5 for me. It is those top 2. And 29 or 39 might have 33 beat. But that roller coaster was just fucking cool, man. It was really cool. So I might have to go 33. But they're neck and neck for sure. Their next question, what WrestleMania match should have been the main event but was overshadowed by the co-main event in your top 5? So I'm kind of confused, though, as to what your question is. You're saying what match should have been the main event but was overshadowed by the co-main event. So are you saying, like, for example, Taker and Shawn at 25 arguably should have been the main event, but it wasn't overshadowed by, like, Orton and Triple H, though? Are you saying like that the actual main event ended up getting the main event and that's why it was overshadowed? Is that what you're saying? I don't really understand your question, but I threw down like Punk and Jericho for Mania 28. Now that wasn't a great match. It was a pretty good match. If they got rid of the stipulation where if Punk got DQ'd, he would have lost the title, I didn't like that kind of hampered the match for me. That match absolutely, in my opinion, would have main evented Mania had Cena and Rock not happen on that show. It might have even been Cena and Punk again. They probably would have run it back on that same show, maybe with Punk as the heel, I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, that would have been the main event. I would have enjoyed that as a main event. Lesnar and Goldberg, no, not from WrestleMania 20, but WrestleMania 33 was a terrific match in 2017. Again, did I want it? I actually said going into it, I do not want that as the main event. But it ended up being way fucking better than Taker and Roman, which was just an absolute mess. I also wrote down Flair and Savage. That might be the best example, because that was not the main event, although Flair was the champion. And Hogan and Slaughter, or Hogan and Sid Vicious, was not for any title at all. That was just the main event, which was just stupid. Flair and Savage doesn't really get talked about as much as the main event because it wasn't the main event. So, I mean, I guess that might be the best answer to your question. I wrote down Shawn and Taker from 25. Mysterio, Angle, Orton, if the match was better, maybe. I mean, it only got 8 minutes at 22, but again, that should have been the main event. Rey Mysterio won the World Heavyweight Championship that night. He won the Royal Rumble. That probably should have been the main event and not Cena and Triple H, which was the better match. But yeah, because they got more time. With more time, Mysterio, Angle, and Orton, if it wasn't so rushed, might have been the better match. And then I also wrote down Stone Cold and Bret Hart. Again, was it going to be the main event if it wasn't for a title? I mean, I guess it could have been. There's been a lot of Manias where the championship did not go on last, but it was by far way better than Taker and Psycho Sid that night. And not only that, but it's one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. So you can make a case there as well, even though nothing was really on the line. Greg L. from Facebook, their question was, what would you consider to be the best WrestleMania moment of all time? Man, it's a good question. It's a tough question, though. You could say Hogan slamming Andre. Is that the best? I don't know if it's the best. It's certainly one of the biggest. Literally and figuratively, is that one. I mean, you could say Yeselmania, Daniel Bryan winning the title at Mania 30. I would probably, I don't know if I would say that. I just feel like that's recency bias. Stone Cold finally becoming champion. I don't know if that was the WrestleMania moment, but it's up there. The best Mania match is Shawn and Taker from 25, but you're saying best Mania moment, though. Best Mania moment. Daniel Bryan's might be high up there. The match was great, but that moment was pretty special. It was a really special match. It was a really special match, but really a special moment as well when he won. When he won that match. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of other, and also, you probably might have to go with, speaking of Austin and Hart, when Stone Cold was bleeding in the sharpshooter and he didn't, he tapped out or passed out, whatever, with the bloody face. That might be the Mania moment, to be honest with you, because it made Stone Cold that night. So that might be it. I'm trying to think of other Mania moments that really, really stood out as far as being the moment. It might be those. I'd really have to go back and think about it, but those come to mind as far as being like the Mount Rushmore moments. It might be those. Stone Cold aligning with Vince in Mania 17 is a massive moment. The best, definitely not, because it kind of killed the Attitude Era, actually. But the other ones, to me, would be better Mania moments as far as the grand scheme of things at the WrestleMania. Justin K. from Facebook, his first question was, have you played as Gallus yet in 2K? And when can we expect a GM mode for 2K24 rolling out on the channel? No, I have not played as Gallus yet in 2K. I know Justin has. I don't know if I'll use them once, but I'm glad you are. I have not played as Gallus yet because I don't have the game yet. Now, I don't know when I'm getting the game. I got the game around launch the last 2 years. I don't know if I am this year. I don't really know, actually. I don't think I am. I might have to wait a little while to get it, so it might be a while, honestly. Which works so well because I'm really loving what we're doing right now in GM mode, and I don't really want to interrupt that. Now, we're so close. We're close. We're not that close to Mania in GM mode. I think we're like 7 or 8 episodes off from that. So I'm going to finish that. Maybe by then I'll have bought 2K24. I kind of want to wrap up GM mode by finishing in the game with week 50. And then if I don't have the game still by that point, we might continue 2K23. But I mean, I don't know. We're fucking rolling right now, so I feel bad interrupting it. So I don't know. I don't know when I'm getting 2K24. Cheap plug, though, I did do a sneak peek video of Alexis and I playing the game. No footage of the game. I don't have a capture card, so that is what it is. But my reactions while playing it, I'm exhausted now, but I was even more exhausted in that video. So if I sound monotone, that's why. I got literally, maybe not no sleep, but very close to no sleep throughout that week, as we went from Disney to the Royal Rumble weekend, and it was just a lot. So, but that video went up last night as far as our initial reactions to the game, so you can check that out. That was the first and only time I've played it so far, and it's a great game, but I need to get it for myself, and I don't have it yet, so hopefully at some point I do. And, yeah, so check that out on the channel, and then hopefully at some point we can do 2K24 GM mode. Your second question also kind of had to do with that. Any plans to do a universe mode for the YouTube channel in the near future that would feature AEW? Are you talking like in 2K23 or 24 as far as doing universe mode in that game? Because I also just got Fight Forever, and I did the whole video here on the channel a week or two ago as far as my initial reactions to that game. I'm not recording any content from that because if I had it on my PS4, I probably would. I got it. The person who sent it to me, and shout out to Jacy, she was the one who sent it to me. She sent me her copy, and it's a PS5 game. Now, I don't own a PS5. Alexis's brother does. So, whenever I'm with him or hanging out, which is not very often, I try to play the game then. So, and I don't want to record content on his PS5, and just, it's a whole process. So, I'm not recording content in that game. The universe mode I did do in 2K23 with LA Knight. I was going to try doing it, like I tried one time simulating a show or like doing GM mode. One, it kind of muddies the waters with what we're doing with GM mode because it's kind of hard to keep track of all of it. But two, I realized like you can't add promos and shit. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like it's only matches. And I don't like that at all, and I didn't really like the layout of it, so we didn't end up doing it. So no, I will probably not be doing universe mode again unless I play as another wrestler. And even with LA Knight, it was fun, but it got very repetitive pretty quickly. So I don't know if I would do universe mode again as far as channel content. So probably not. I kind of stick to GM mode. That's my bread and butter. And at some point, we will get to 2K24 GM mode. In the meantime, you can continue to enjoy GM or GSM for GM in 2K23 right now here on the channel. Not his next question, but Christopher L. from Facebook. His first question was, do you think Jeff Jarrett gets too much hate as a wrestler and as a pro wrestling personality? He's always had a reputation for having a huge ego about the way that he's booked, and has a way of rubbing certain people the wrong way. The way he left WWE in 1999 left a bad taste in a lot of wrestling fans' mouths. He was universally panned during his final run with WCW, and when he founded TNA Wrestling, he let his ego get out of control and booked himself to win multiple NWA World Championships with excessive overbooking and him always constantly going over. While people seem to have forgiven him for his overinflated ego and politicking his way throughout most of his career, he seems to be having fun in AEW while not being too overexposed. Do you think the hate he got was warranted? For that stuff, yeah. I mean, in TNA, yeah. In WCW and WWE, maybe not. I think Jeff Jarrett's really good. I think Jeff Jarrett is Hall of Fame worthy. He is in the WWE Hall of Fame. I like Jarrett a lot, but like, I wasn't watching TNA in early 2000s, so it's kind of hard for me to say. But the fact that he was running the company and he was the TNA champion multiple times, I mean, it's kind of fucking dumb. I mean, that is the definition of being a big star in a small pond. A big star, quote unquote, is relative, obviously, but and even like when they bring in Sting and Angle, kind of thankfully they transition to him, or they transition to people like that and putting the title on them, and the younger stars in years that followed. But Jeff Jarrett was not, I mean, could he have been a world champion in WWE? Maybe. But they had way bigger stars than him in the late 90s and early 2000s that it was never going to happen. And in WCW, same thing. All their stars were gone, so they put the fucking belt on Jeff like 5 times or whatever it was. So it was one of those things where he was a big fish in a small pond in TNA. Early on, and it was like, dude, the excessive overbooking, like you mentioned, it was ridiculous. So I can kind of see why people didn't like Jeff Jarrett, and he was never like this extraordinary talent, but he was good enough that it's not like he was terrible. I wouldn't say he warranted the hate, but people not liking him for the TNA stuff specifically, where he was constantly on top while running the promotion, that I would say is probably warranted. Your next question, Sting had the perfect send-off on Sunday, competing with Darby Allin against the Young Bucks in a fantastic match that was incredibly well booked. Unfortunately, that's not always the case in pro wrestling. There have been times where the final match of a superstar is either misfired or the match was not very good. Examples are Bret Hart at WrestleMania 26, Ric Flair at WrestleMania 24, and Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 35. What other retirement matches can you think of that are as bad as these? Good question. I mean, the Bret Hart one, to be fair, a couple things. That was not the last match he ever had. He had other matches after that. That was probably the most active he was in that match. But that match will not go down as Bret Hart's retirement match or his final match ever. He did partake in other matches in the years that followed. For as throwaway as they were, this was not his last match. And that Vince match was pretty bad, but what do you expect from a guy that had a fucking stroke? He probably should have never been even in that spot to begin with. So, that's kind of understandable. The other ones you mentioned, Kurt Angle at 35, I mean, I kind of did some research as far as like worst final matches ever. That one keeps getting brought up. I didn't think the match was awful. It was just very disappointing as far as Angle could have faced really any number of people for his final match. The Corbin match did make sense from a storyline standpoint. I get that. But it just wasn't very exciting. And they did nothing with Corbin after it. It's not like even like he benefited from retiring Kurt Angle. It went fucking nowhere. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely up there. The Ric Flair one I disagree with. I think the Ric Flair-Shawn Michaels match is great. I've seen that enough times. I really, really love that match. The ending is great. Flair looks every bit of his age and then some in that match. I get it. But it was a pretty beautiful way for him to be sent off. That's one of the best retirements ever. Not worst, best. The match and the post-show aftermath, post-match aftermath, and even the next night is all retirement ceremony. But as far as worst retirement matches, I have two written down here, and then I have a third one that just came to my mind. One, which I believe was his final match, The Ultimate Warrior. It wasn't billed as his final match, but he came out of retirement to face Orlando fucking Jordan at a random show, in Australia in 2008? And I've seen the match. It's not very long, but it fucking sucks. The guy was winded by the time he got to the ring. Now, you could say that about Warrior matches from, like, the 80s. And I like Warrior, and I like the character and shit. Not big, not too fond of some of the stuff he said over the years. No shit there, but my fandom for Warrior goes beyond that sort of stuff. It doesn't really have to do with that at all, obviously. But as far as in the ring, he never really had a proper retirement match, but I think it's because this match went so poorly. The match, it might still be on YouTube or Dailymotion or something. It's just, that's got to be the worst retirement match I think I've ever seen, or the final match of any given superstar. Mick Foley, I mean, he had a couple different retirement matches with Triple H and Randy Orton, Edge, whatever, and then he just kept coming back. So Foley, I know he said recently, I want to wrestle one more hardcore match before I turn 65. I'm like, no, dude, stop. He wants to lose 100 pounds for it? No, just stay at home. You could barely walk as it is. I love Foley, but just stop. His final match, I think, was the Royal Rumble in 2012. And that wasn't even a good Rumble. I think the final lasting image of Foley in the ring was of him and Santino during Mr. Sacco and doing the Cobra together. As bad as that sounds. So that might be worse. I mean, that's not worse than Warriors, but it's pretty bad for an ending of a career as iconic as Mick Foley's. He just kept coming back one too many times. And the one that just came to mind, it wasn't billed as his retirement match, but it will go down as his last match ever for all things considered, unless he comes back for one more match, is Shawn Michaels. Now, not 26, but you're saying the last match of a wrestler, the final match of a superstar, and that was Crown Jewel 2018, one of the worst matches I have ever fucking seen, with him and Triple H against the Brothers of Destruction. So bad that 3 of the 4 people in that match got hurt. And Shawn Michaels, a guy that had not wrestled in over 10 years, about 10 years by that point, looked the best out of all of them. That's how bad that match was. So I got to go. Shawn is up there as well, but I got to go Warrior, Foley, and Shawn for being all worse than the ones that you mentioned, although Kurt might be up there as well. Your next question, I feel like WWE dropped the ball when it comes to Gunther defending the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania. I feel like the whole gauntlet is pointless because Gunther has only communicated with 2 of the competitors in the match, Sami Zayn and Chad Gable. Why don't the rest just set up the match as a triple threat between Gunther, Gable, and Sami Zayn? Or why don't they just set the match as a triple threat between Gunther, Gable, and Zayn is what you said. Gunther really succeeds in matches with smaller guys, and he has a masterclass triple threat, and he had a masterclass triple threat at last year's show. So why not continue the formula? What do you think? I don't really like the idea of Gunther having another multi-man match at Mania. He just had one a year ago. And I feel like if he's going to be beaten, he might not even lose, even if it's one-on-one. It should not be in a triple threat. They could set up a triple threat, and I would not mind it, but I feel like that's weaker than the sum of its parts. I'd rather they just do Gable versus Gunther or Zayn versus Gunther. They could get to a point in the gauntlet where it ends in a draw or something, and they set up a multi-man match. But I feel like we're getting Owens, Orton, and Logan Paul in a triple threat for the United States Championship. And even if they weren't doing that, I still would not want a triple threat for the Intercontinental Championship. I think Gunther deserves a high-profile singles match this year. So I don't love the idea. I wouldn't hate it if they did it, because it does get both guys on the show. Zayn or Gable, if he loses, he's not on the show. I'm pretty convinced of that. Zayn would probably find a different role. I don't know what that would be. I really want Gable to win. Zayn winning is great too. I just don't like the idea of a triple threat, because I feel like we're already getting one for the U.S. title, and we just saw Gunther have one last year. So I don't really love that idea. His next question, if CMLL is unable to compete at Forbidden Door this year, do you think TNA Wrestling should fill in as a replacement, since Tony has had business relations with them in the past? And if you do, what matches would you like to see? Yeah, honestly, listen, I would much, much, much rather see TNA involved in the current spot that CMLL finds itself in than CMLL. I just don't give a fuck about CMLL. They have great wrestlers, but these matches mean nothing. A lot of the matches we see in AWTV with those guys do not mean anything. I just don't care. I mean, you can make the same case for TNA, but at least I would say more people probably watch in the current AEW audience. I would make the argument more people watch TNA than CMLL. And I could be wrong, but that's the impression that I get. I don't think TNA really stands to benefit from getting their guys on the show every week and losing every fucking match. It's kind of the problem with their initial working relationship back in 2020, 2021, when they had a lot of people on AEW, not a lot of people on AWTV, but it was pretty one-sided as far as TNA got the shaft a lot. Kenny Omega appeared in Impact quite a bit, but he didn't make a whole lot of appearances really overall. And there weren't a lot of people from TNA Impact that were appearing in AEW. Really far from it. So, I don't know if that's going to work again. I think that was short-lived, and it was fine for while it lasted, and didn't really end up benefiting TNA much at all. I would much prefer that than the CMLL stuff, but I'm just saying, as far as like overall, it's probably not going to accomplish anything. But yeah, I would rather see that than CMLL and at Forbidden Door, even if CMLL can't make the show for what it is. What would you say is the best, or who would you say is the best big man in the history of pro wrestling? I mean, it's got to be Andre the Giant. I mean, in the ring, no. I mean, the guy's had a lot of awful matches, but Andre was an attraction through and through. Everyone knows Andre, and a lot of people know The Undertaker as well. Taker is by far a better wrestler than Andre. So if you say Taker, I wouldn't argue with you, but I feel like you just have to go Andre. As far as, if you're saying as a worker, then probably Taker, or Bam Bam Bigelow, or someone like that. Kane also is up there, Big Show. Andre was never a good worker. Big Show is a much better worker than Andre ever was, but Andre was still a massive, literally and figuratively, attraction. It's hard to argue against Andre in that role. So I would go Andre. If not Andre, if you're talking like overall, like with wrestlers stuff included, like his matches and shit, I probably would go Taker. At BillMeister88 from Twitter. Yeah, from Twitter. With Michael Cole acknowledging Sting and AEW on live WWE TV, do you foresee a day when we get the ultimate, I'm speaking of Forbidden Door, do you foresee a day when we get the ultimate Forbidden Door of WWE versus AEW? If it happened tomorrow, what matches would you want? I could see WWE working with AEW more in the future, because never say never at this point. The crazy shit we've seen happen, never say never. Doing a WWE versus AEW show, I'm reserved to the fact it's probably not happening. Because, I mean, as I always say, what does WWE get out of it? Their business is booming. Why would they need to work with another promotion as far as that sort of stuff? They don't. Maybe getting footage or using someone for a night or whatever, that'd be cool. But like doing a show like that, it really comes down to who's winning what matches, who wins the overall thing. And if it ends in a stalemate, that's not really all that interesting. Excuse me. It would be better than not doing one at all, but WWE doesn't really stand to benefit from that. AEW is a lot more to benefit than WWE. So I don't see us ever really getting that. As far as what matches we would get, or I would want to see if it did happen in some alternate universe, AJ Styles versus really a lot of people in AEW would be cool. Kenny Omega specifically, I know he's always wanted to work with AJ. Will Ospreay being another one. Will Ospreay and Rollins would make a lot of sense. There's a lot. FTR versus the Usos. They've had matches, but Like, the Usos are, like, fantastic now. Roman versus Moxley. Again, a match we've seen before, but not these current characters that they have now. MJF versus maybe Roman Reigns or a Rollins or a Cena or someone like that would be interesting. Or, CM Punk, which we've seen before in AEW, but in WWE would be cooler. A Forbidden Door type show where MJF can beat Punk and avenge the loss from Revolution 2 years ago, whatever. So you have that. There's a lot of matches that I could probably come up with, that I have come up with before, but those are the few that come to mind. At Iwagu91, as we wind down here, we got a couple more questions from him and at noob_n_co-tv, but we'll start with that Iwagu91. He says, I feel that unlike Danielson's match with Omega at Grand Slam, Danielson, taking on Ospreay should happen at a pay-per-view like Dynasty or Double or Nothing so that the full match can be seen in all of its glory. What do you think? I agree. I mean, if they wanted to do it on TV, then maybe. But the thing with Omega and Bryan, it wasn't just a match on TV. It was at Grand Slam, which was their first of its kind. It was a big show. But moreover than that, it was Bryan's in-ring debut for AEW. So he really made his debut in an amazing way. Ospreay just had his debut, so his in-ring debut on Dynamite or in AEW in general will not be against Bryan Danielson. That cat's already out of the bag. If it was, then maybe. Like, if they hadn't done that, then maybe. But they did, so I don't think that's going to happen. They should save it for pay-per-view, I agree. Maybe Dynasty. I think Double or Nothing might make more sense. Dynasty doesn't feel like it's going to be all that important of a show, but I could be wrong. So, we should absolutely get the first meeting between them, and they should book the match at some point before Bryan dies down as a full-time competitor on pay-per-view at some point this year. Your next question, while I'm absolutely fine with Danielson not winning any titles in AEW, which AEW title do you think he should win if he wants to? To me, it's got to be the world title. Now, I don't really know where that fits in before he retires or winds down at All In. Can he really win the belt before he calls it a career? I mean, we just saw Sting retire as champion, so that's probably not going to happen. I, too, agree Danielson does not need a title, but I also agree I would like to see him with a championship before he wraps it up. He doesn't need the Continental Crown Championship. I guess the TNT title could work. I would prefer the World Championship because he's held world titles in Ring of Honor and WWE and would be now AEW as well. But I don't know how likely that is. I think they missed their window with that a year or two ago. But that being said, it probably would be the World Championship. I don't really know where he would factor into that, though, is the problem. He also asked your thoughts on Sting's AEW run. I thought it was great. I mean, I've said this before, but I thought they booked his career very well. Pretty much perfectly in AEW. You can't do this with everyone, but he never lost a single match, never had a singles match, didn't really end up needing one. He did all tag team stuff, shined every time, never really looked his age. Had some really fun feuds and matches, and got to work with a lot of different talent because of the tag team stuff. Had a perfect send-off. Went out as a champion. Noob asked the same thing. He goes, what are your thoughts on his final match at Revolution? Bloody Darby Allin spot aside, he says, I kind of liked it. I'm glad that Sting won and retired. No, I agree. They went all out. I thought the match was great. The stuff with his sons was awesome. And the fact that he won, I was not expecting, so that was a pleasant surprise. That was a great shocker. And he retired as champion, as he should have. So I like that a lot. I love that Sting went undefeated in AEW. No one ever really gets to do that. Never suffered a single loss in that company. How many people can say they've done that in any promotion? And it's not like he really needed to elevate anyone in that way. I mean, he elevated people by simply sharing the ring with them, I would argue. So, I love the run. I love how they used Sting. And it was a nice way to kind of cap off his career after the injury that seemingly ended his career the first time around in WWE. That was really disappointing. I'm glad he got a kind of a second lease on life with the run in AEW. Also from Noob, he asked, when will Jade Cargill debut and who will she face at WrestleMania 40? My guess is Nia Jax, because Nia has been feuding with Becky and now Liv for a couple of weeks. It's someone new for Nia to face at WrestleMania. I think I said this already here on the show, but yeah, I do think it will be Jade and Nia. Now, they did tease Jade interacting with Damage Control last week on SmackDown. Could Jade join SmackDown, kind of go to Bayley's aid with Bianca, and then we get Jade and Bianca versus the Kabuki Warriors at Mania? Yeah, that is very possible. I feel like you can get two better matches out of it, though, with Becky facing Tiffany and then Jade facing Nia. That would get Nia on the show. I don't really care about Nia being on the show, but if they want to get her on the show, that's how you do it. And she could beat her, slamming her, which she already did at the Rumble, I guess. Would be like a Mania moment, a spectacle, whatever. So I don't know how good the match would be, obviously. It would be probably pretty abysmal. But if they keep it short and sweet, it could work. So I would prefer probably Jade versus Nia. But if they wanted to go Jade and Bianca versus the Kabuki Warriors, I wouldn't mind that either. So I feel like either option is probably pretty likely. Last question from Newbie. Your thoughts on Dakota Kai turning on Bayley last week on SmackDown? I find it interesting. But what's been bothering me as of late is that this Bayley versus Io Mania feud feels like an Asuka and Kairi Sane storyline. I mean, they're part of Damage Control too. So the fact they've been incorporated into the storyline doesn't really bother me. It just kind of makes sense. They have heated it up a little bit. I like the Dakota Kai turn. I thought it was well done. Predictable as all fuck, obviously. Saw it coming a mile away. But it was well executed. It was what needed to be done. And the feud's been good so far. It hasn't been like an amazing feud. The story's been great. It hasn't closed out any shows. I mean, it's been kind of just there. Hopefully they can kind of kick it up into the next gear in the next couple of weeks. But, yeah, I mean, the fact that Asuka and Kairi are involved, the whole story is that Bayley's outnumbered. 4-1 now. She definitely needs backup. And I'm not sure who that's going to be if it's not Bianca and Jade. Probably Bianca. I don't know about Jade yet. I mean, maybe Michin and Chauncey, but they're not really, big enough names, I think. So it's got to be probably some other female of that kind of caliber, like a Jade or a Bianca, for people that really care. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that Bayley's been outnumbered so far with Asuka and Kairi and now Io and Dakota, it just makes sense. But hopefully Bayley can find some friends and find some backup so she's not going to WrestleMania having to overcome all these odds alone. And that's going to do it, guys, for today's edition of #AskGSM. 3 full pages of questions. Takes a long time to answer this stuff, and it's definitely exhausting, but it's well worth it. Another episode that goes well over an hour long because of your great questions. So I appreciate you guys for that one. Be sure to send in more questions via YouTube by dropping a comment down below in the comment section. I'll include your question in next week's edition. On Twitter as well, at WrestleRant. Tweet me with the hashtag #AskGSM with your question. And on Facebook, facebook.com/Graham.gsm.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. I'll include your question in next week's edition. Have an awesome one, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be back with another great loaded episode next week here on the channel. Until then, enjoy your week, guys. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.